Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know the deal. You're here because you want to get smart fast. And today we're diving into something that might seem, well, a little unexpected.
Unexpected? How so?
Well, we're talking about banning books, like actual physical books, and how all this censorship could actually end up backfiring when it comes to the future of AI.
I see where you're going with this. So not just the usual worries about AI taking over the world, but about what kind of world it's learning from in the first place.
Exactly. We've got a whole pile of stuff here, articles, arguments, even a top 10 list comparing the two. And we're going to try to figure out why some folks are saying that book bans might actually be a bigger problem for AI than all that AI-generated content we keep hearing about.
Makes sense. I mean, we're always talking about how much data AI needs, but maybe the real question is what happens when you start deliberately taking information away?
Right. Like, could we be accidentally building an AI that only knows half the story just because we decided certain books weren't allowed?
That's the big question, isn't it? And to understand that, we need to start with the basics, like how AI learns. Think of it like a student, right? They read textbooks, papers, all that stuff, and that becomes their knowledge base.
So if you take away some of those textbooks, well, the student's going to have some gaps in their knowledge.
Exactly. And it's the same for AI. They learn by absorbing tons of text, books, articles, everything online. That's their training data. So if we're taking books off the shelves in libraries and schools, well, they're less likely to get digitized and end up in those massive data sets that AI uses to learn.
Okay, so let's say we're banning books about, oh, I don't know, LGBTQ plus experiences.
That's a prime example, actually, because we know those books are being targeted more and more. But if they're missing from AI's training data, then how's it going to learn about those experiences, about those perspectives? It's like trying to teach history, but only covering one side of the story.
So it's not just that the AI is missing some facts. It's missing a whole way of seeing the world.
Precisely. And one of the things that really stands out from our sources is this idea that it's not just random information that's being removed, it's targeted.
Right, because we know who usually ends up on the banned books list.
It's not a coincidence that it's often authors from marginalized communities, people of color, LGBTQ plus folks, anyone whose story challenges the mainstream narrative. And that has huge implications for AI, because if it's only learning from a limited set of voices, well, it's going to end up reflecting those limitations, right? It's not like the AI is consciously choosing to be biased. It's just learning from what it's given.
And it's not just about opinions or perspectives. We're talking about facts too, right?
Absolutely. Some of the sources were talking about this idea of like government-mandated holes in our knowledge.
Because these book bans aren't just suggestions, they're actual laws, enforced by school boards, sometimes even the police. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark reality. And when you think about it from an AI perspective, it's kind of disturbing. Imagine an AI trying to learn about a complex topic like, oh, I don't know, human biology.
But it's only got access to a censored version of the textbook.
Exactly. And because those missing pieces were removed deliberately, it creates these official blind spots. Think about sensitive topics like sexuality. If accurate information is being labeled obscene and removed, then how can an AI possibly give us good information when it's been trained on a censored data set?
It's like sending a doctor to med school, but only teaching them half the human body.
It's a scary thought, right? And this isn't even just about factual information. It's about emotions, ideas, different ways of thinking. One source put it really well. They said, banning books teaches fear of ideas.
And how does an AI learn about fear? Or any emotion, for that matter?
Through stories, through conversations, through seeing how humans react and interact in all sorts of situations. And literature is one of the best ways we have to explore those complexities. So if we start removing books because they deal with difficult topics or because they challenge certain beliefs, then we're limiting AI's understanding of what it means to be human.
So it's not just a knowledge gap, it's an empathy gap.
Exactly. Like another source said, bans strangle the market and the mind. But you could say they also strangle AI's potential for truly understanding us, you know?
It's like if you only ever listen to pop music, are you really going to understand what music can be?
That's a great analogy.
Sure.
And then there's the whole question of who benefits from these limitations, because let's face it, these bans don't just happen randomly.
Right. They're usually specific groups pushing for them.
And the sources make it pretty clear that these groups often have agendas. They want to control the narrative. So if AI is being trained on data that's been shaped by these agendas, well, it's going to reflect those biases whether we want it to or not.
It's like if you only invite people who agree with you to debate, you're not really going to get a fair discussion.
Precisely. And as one source pointed out, people with agendas do that target marginalized authors for removal, and that has a direct impact on AI's learning process.
Okay, so all of this is pretty concerning. But, we also hear a lot about the explosion of AI-generated content these days. Isn't that a bigger problem for information overload than some books being banned?
That's a really valid point, and it's something our sources address head-on. They make a crucial distinction between the problems caused by too much AI content and the problems caused by book bans.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, the challenges of a huge volume of AI-generated stuff, filtering it, figuring out what's real, those are seen as, generally solvable. Like, we can imagine better AI that helps us evaluate other AI, more sophisticated ways of curating and sorting through the information. So it's a problem, but it's one that technology itself might be able to address.
But book bans, that's different.
Right. The sources emphasize that book bans are irreversible and fundamentally limiting. Once a book is banned, it's gone. It's not just that you choose not to read it, it's that you can't, even if you wanted to.
Because it's not available.
Exactly. One source puts it really simply. You can't access banned books. And this isn't just some abstract concept. They talk about bans as rigid and regressive, even state violence against literature, because it's enforced through laws and institutions. They build walls, as one source says, literally cutting people off from certain ideas. And that's a much harder thing to fix than just building a better filter.
So it's about control.
Absolutely. And that's a key difference with AI. Yeah, AI has its issues, but at least it has the potential to expand access to information. It can help us connect with different perspectives, explore new ideas. But book bans are all about closing those doors.
So basically what our sources are saying is that if we're worried about the future of knowledge, book bans are the bigger threat.
That seems to be the main takeaway, yeah. They paint a pretty stark picture of what happens when we start censoring information. The sources talk about how book bans erase stories, target marginalized authors, destroy access, and teach fear of ideas. And it all comes back to this idea of control.
Because the goal of a book ban isn't to start a conversation, it's to shut it down.
Exactly. One source puts it really bluntly, banning books is always about control, never liberation. And they make the point that you can't ethically censor a library shelf. You're denying people the right to choose what they read, what they learn.
And how does that contrast with how our sources see AI?
Well, while AI might produce a lot of noise, it also creates more stories. It can help us imagine new worlds, explore different possibilities. And importantly, it doesn't single out queer, Black, or feminist voices for removal the way human-driven bans do. It can be a tool for amplifying those voices, for giving people a platform to share their stories.
So it's about potential.
Yeah. The sources talk about how AI can expand access, how it can support creators with limited resources, and they point out that the ethical guidelines around AI are constantly evolving and improvable. It's not perfect, but it's learning, it's adapting, and that's a lot more promising than the rigid, backward-looking nature of censorship.
And our top 10 list really sums up these key differences.
Absolutely. I think it's worth going through a few of them.
Okay, so first up, book bans erase stories. AI creates more of them.
Right. That's about silence versus amplification, about shrinking the world of ideas versus expanding it.
Then there's this one. Book bans target marginalized authors. AI doesn't single out queer, Black, or feminist voices for removal. People with agendas do that.
Which gets right to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? The bias in book bans comes from human choices, from a desire to control what people have access to.
And this next one really highlights the difference in their nature. AI is a tool. Book bans are a weapon.
Because one can be used for good or bad, right? But the other is inherently about restriction, about limiting freedom.
And then this one. Book bans destroy access. AI expands it.
It's the difference between building walls and building bridges. And this point really drives home the impact on the individual. You can opt out of AI content. You can't access banned books.
It's the difference between having a choice and having no choice at all.
Exactly. And then finally, looking at the potential for change. AI is evolving and improvable. Bans are rigid and regressive.
Which speaks to the hopefulness of AI, right? It might be messy right now, but it's learning, it's getting better. But bans, they're stuck in the past.
And I think this last point from the list really ties it all together. More stories, more freedom. AI might flood the market, but that's a solvable problem. Bans strangle the market and the mind.
Because ultimately it's about abundance versus scarcity, about openness versus control.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway from all these sources. They're arguing that if we truly care about the future of knowledge, we need to be more worried about the books we're banning than the AI we're building.
Because by limiting the information AI has access to, we're limiting its potential.
And we're risking a future where AI reflects not the fullness of human experience, but the narrowness of our own biases.
It's a lot to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a question. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, what does it mean if the information we're feeding these systems is already filtered through censorship? What happens when the books we ban today end up shaping the AI of tomorrow?